So, special guest this week for the Table of Knowledge. So I is for International Women's Day, and very coincidentally, we happen to be filming on recording and filming on International Women's Day. So welcome to Kay Rudd, who is the owner of Jigsaw Plan Management, and Prue Martin, who's the owner of Warrington Scott. In Goulburn. And we thought we would do just a discussion between the four of us, because we're all from different generations. So, not different generations, different decades. We're all probably the same generation, mostly. So, anyway, Kate, we'll start with you, because you kind of happen to be the oldest.
Thanks, Jo. Thank you for having me this morning. Mm-hmm. So I guess what we're talking about are all these generations working together in the workplace now. I find it's not challenging, but it's interesting.
Definitely.
So when I think about my generation, the baby boomers, because as everyone's aware, I'm in my 60s, so I am a baby boomer, and we're the ones that started working in suits, whereas the millenniums are in jeans, and that's what they feel like is what they wear to work, which is fine. And in the middle are the Gen Xers, who are who are the entrepreneurs of the world. So they're the ones that are right into that now. I feel like the diversity of the generations enriches the workplace, because we all have a different perspective of what we feel like the workplace should look like. And sometimes that's challenging, but most times it's actually really good. So, we find that the older people may have a different loyalty to the business than younger people, and there's nothing wrong with either end of those. It's just the different perspective. I feel like the baby boomers, the older generation, may have the maturity to handle like social situations and the office politics and things like that. They have that lived experience, I guess. But the younger ones also have something to offer, and they may have more knowledge in the technology side. So it's a strength of diversity across the workplace, I feel. And for the first time ever, we're not required to retire at a certain age. It's that people that want to continue on. I actually had a comment from someone yesterday and said to me, I don't think you're ready to retire, even though I'm quite at that age. But I feel like the flexibility in the workplace is really new for me. Like I started working, obviously, when there were not even a computer in sight. So the changes that I've seen in the workplace are massive, even though I feel like it's not a lot of time, I guess, when you say it is. But, so the flexibility is awesome, because now we're not only recognising that mums need flexibility, we're also recognising that dads need it, and also grandparents. So, the grandparents want to go and take care of their kids and their grandchildren and things like that. So I feel like the diversity is good. So we've all got a place in the workplace, and I think that we're niching it and working it quite well together. So
definitely. I think it's the acknowledging that everyone is different and brings something different to the table. Again, I guess I can talk next, because I'm the one in the 50s, so we're going down the decades. When I started working, we had no computers either, and it feels like it was yesterday. And when you think back at how different it is, and when you were talking about wearing suits, I'm wearing a bit of a hippie dress today. There's no way in this world I would have worn this. When I first started working, it was like, a blazer and a skirt with stockings. Like, again, things I probably tend not to wear unless I'm really cold.
And to that, given that it's International Women's Day, were we trying to dress like men?
I'm pretty sure.
Was that the expectation?
I think it
and
was.
I'm not having a crack. I'm just stating the obvious, really. Were we expected? Was that expected of us?
I think it was. And I was thinking about exactly the same thing. Like, we, particularly in my day, it was like you had to be like the blokes. In a lot of ways too, even in things like after work, if you wanted to be in their culture, you had to go and drink heaps and get on the grog and all that. And I think it's so different these days, and it's so much better. Like, I look at you coming to work wearing the most beautiful clothes and think, you know, it's awesome. You can dress as you want and still be respected for being a woman and a business owner, and not necessarily trying to fit into that blokey stereotype.
Yeah. So I guess too, when Prue says that, were we trying to climb the ladder? In my day, pardon me, the women weren't bosses.
No.
When I started working, it was all the males. And I guess that may have been part of that, the way we dressed. I will still say that I love a uniform.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
Absolutely not. But it doesn't. It's very female, especially being in a female-oriented environment.
Yes.
Your uniform is also
Yeah.
for that reason.
Yeah.
That's not the blue. Remember the blue
No.
zip?
Yeah. I don't.
Aussie used to wear.
When I used to work at Coles, it was like that.
Oh yes. Yes.
I had one of them. I'm sure you did too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. So I guess that was part of it as well, that women were trying to climb that ladder and, you know, have that respect that a man in a suit did. Whereas nowadays, women in their own right, on International Women's Day, I'm surrounded by wonderful women in this office. So everyone's amazing, and we all have our place.
And just to clarify, we all work in the same in the same office. So we're different businesses, but we all work in the same environment, and we're very supportive of each other, of each other's businesses.
100%.
So your turn, Prue. Have a chat about your experience or what you think International Women's Day
I think I'm really going to just extend on what Kay said in terms of diversity. It's absolutely incredible what we see now in our workforces, from 18-year-olds, having 18-year-olds work for us, working underneath 70-year-olds or working above 70-year-olds. And I think that's amazing. And I had a mother that would probably still be working today. She would have been 75 this year.
Wow.
And I'd say she still would have been doing a couple of shifts a week
I'm sure she
in
would have
intensive
been,
care, without a doubt. That said, my greatest challenge is managing sometimes each decade. What I do, I have a tendency to expect that of others, and that is my downfall. And so therefore it's managing my expectations. That's the hardest thing I find in having a diverse group, absolutely, whether it be female or male. And it comes down to, I love my job, and so therefore I expect everyone else to love their jobs. Whether you're working at Coles or because I also feel that we now have the opportunity to change. So therefore, if you don't like your job, go and find another one. But please don't make it my problem. And I think that's the hardest thing. And we're entering an environment financially where people are really going to hold on to their jobs, given interest rate rises, rising inflation, and those sorts of things. So for me, it is managing my expectations of staff. And what does flexibility mean? A recruiter asked me this the other day. What is flexibility? You say, oh, come and work at Jigsaw because we offer flexibility arrangements. That's right. But what does that really mean? Does that mean you can work whenever you want? One of the local businesses in town sends me an email, and she says on it, my working hours are flexible, so therefore I may send you an out of hours email. There is zero expectation for you to reply to this out of your hours. And that is so true. But yes, what is flexible? And so I think that's a unique offering, but how unique really is it? So you have to really detail that for prospective staff or existing staff. I think for some of us of the older ones, I'm not that old.
You're not that old, Prue.
Lucky you've got an older one here.
You really look at, in terms of flexibility, you either worked back in the day 9 to 3 because you're a school mum, or you did 8:30 to 5. There was nothing in between. We also enjoy being in the office. We've been so used to being in the office, whereas younger people, I want to work from home. And I only want to do 4 days.
Yes.
But I found when I did a 4-day role, I was still expected to do 7 days worth of work in 4 days. So it really is embracing the diversity, but I think you have to drill down and work out, start how you want it to end at the end of the day. What is my end goal?
So interesting, Prue, that you said about, you know, the way you work and how your expectations of others are because of the way you work. I had a wonderful boss several years ago that said to me when I had a comment to, why do people arrive at work at 8:30 and they finish at 5 and that's it? They don't, do any minutes overtime or, finish anything. And she once said to me, yeah, I wonder who that was. She once said to me, just because that's the way you roll doesn't mean everyone does. So, their work hours are 8:30 to 5 and they have an hour for lunch, and just because you don't work those hours, it shouldn't be your expectation for other people to do it. So once I was told that by a wise woman, I was like, yeah, that is so true, so true.
And should we bring our young person into the conversation?
I have just been quietly listening because, and taking all of this in because, I have worked with quite a diverse range of ages, and, sometimes some of the things that I struggle with as someone who is almost in her 30s is that not having those respect levels to be in a position of management and not being viewed as someone who is good enough to take on those roles, but also having the knowledge of technology and things like that to say, I can see how we can do this smarter. And it's a really hard balance. I find it really difficult sometimes because I want to have that business or whoever I'm working for, or be it my own business, running as successfully and as smartly as possible, and being able to see, hey, we could do this better, but then I also need to understand that that level of change is scary for other generations. It's scary for people the same generation as me. It gets scarier because it's so far removed from what you were used to. And so for me, it's that, again, managing that for different generations, for different decades, that there are different expectations. And, I guess that's probably something that I just, as I get older and mature, have to learn to...
True, but I think it also plays on our own insecurities. So I can go back, similar age, I came into the industry quite young, early 20s, and I enjoyed what I did, so obviously I progressed quite quickly, and I had staff under me that were older than me, and that was really difficult because I'm not very good. I'm the first person to put my hand up. And when it comes to HR, I am not the best person. I will avoid confrontation at all costs. And therefore, managing someone that is older than you, young, because you have a level of respect. For me, it was Mr. and Mrs. It was you don't speak until you're spoken to. So then I am managing an environment where and I also didn't understand what it was like to be a mother back then either. So I only had to worry about me. They had to then go home and cook dinner and do all the stuff that I now do. So my level of appreciation now is different. So it's life skills. It's learnt.
Yes.
It's life lived.
And we actually had this conversation the other day, Lauren, because, I think back to when I was your age, and I was probably in a similar position. Like, I was managing staff. Actually, probably at your age now, I was a mum and I'd stopped working for a very little period of time. But before that, I was managing staff, and I remember it was such a struggle, and some of them were older than me and what have you. And I just said to you, you know what, you're going to be sitting here one day when you're in your 50s having exactly this conversation with the young 20-something-year-old that you're now the boss of. And I think we've all had those conversations, and we all forget that one day we were in our 20s.
Yes.
So, and I didn't think of myself as not being capable of managing someone, and I'm sure you didn't either. And I'm sure you would have been the same, Kay, in that time as well.
Interestingly, in my first role when I left school at 16, and I worked at a department store in Goulburn, when you talk about that and, that you're a leader and how long it takes you now, back in my day, everyone was Mr. or Miss or Mrs., never called them by their first name.
No.
And I do remember, so 5 years I'd been in that role, and one of the departments, head of departments, Miss O'Neill, her name was, from Nolman's, And anyone that's old enough to remember will
Nolman's.
remember Miss O'Neill, and Nolman's. So she gave me a card for my 21st birthday and said to me, it said in it, now that you are of age, 21, you may now call me Kath.
Oh.
To this day, I could never call her Kath because I was read on the Miss O'Neill.
Yeah.
So interestingly, that change
How the
has been
culture's
big as
changed.
well.
Yes.
And in the workplace that affects.
So where do you think women in the workplace is going? Like, I mean, we've made so much advances, but there's still a long way to go, don't you think?
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, even as the youngest person sitting here, which is something that I will talk about today, I have had experiences where I have been told, should I become a mother, my chances of promotion are slim. Obviously not where I currently work, but by a male. And I have seen firms only have women on their partner board because it makes them look progressive. And this is like as little as 12 years ago that some of these things, or even less, that these conversations are happening. And yes, they were older men who obviously were in the mindset of this is how it should be, but it's no longer acceptable.
No. And I mean, look, we've all, the other three of us have all had children and been through that experience. And I know with me particularly, I was working at JP Morgan when I had Joel, and the expectations there was no such thing as part-time work. Like, they just spent heaps of money training me I think it was there for 8 years or something. And then as soon as I had a baby and I wasn't prepared to go and work, 60, 70 hours a week, as a full-time worker, the only choice I had was full-time work or leave. And so I left, and no one questioned that. I think it's so much better these days where we do have the flexibility, we do have paid parental leave. But I also feel like women are much stronger in the workforce because most of my friends just didn't work when they had babies. And like, you've got young children now, and I know it's a struggle, but how do you find it?
I think we are our own worst enemy. These girls here know.
We're interested in this, Prue. Go on.
I can't sit still.
No,
so,
I've never noticed that about you, Prue.
So I am my own worst enemy. I want it all. I want it all for me, but most importantly, I want it all for my children. So I work hard to make sure I can provide, but I get so much satisfaction and reward from my job that I've always had to keep that fairly high on my list of priorities because it fills my cup. As much as my children and my beautiful husband fill my cup, I am my own worst enemy. And so I think half the battle is we can sit here and say the workforce still has a long way to go, but we also have to manage our own insecurities. We also feel the need, the Instagram life, to
We've got to be perfect,
live it
don't
all.
we?
Live it all. Absolutely. I look after my kids. I do this. I do this. I do this, and we find ourselves doing it and posting stuff. At the end of the day, that is on us. But looking at the current increase in interest rates and looking at there is a women's index, that this has put us back again in terms of the gender pay gap, in terms of gender equality, and it's dropped our index by a couple of points because we've got issues with employment, more to come, and the cost of living, full stop. I mean, we want to give our child the choice of every single sport known to man, however that comes at a cost.
Yes.
Sure.
So there's all those sorts of things. So for me, I feel so fortunate that I don't feel it so much in my industry, whether I kept my head in the sand, or just focused on me, my clients, my world, and went down that path, because I've never had a client ever say, well, I don't want a female advisor, because they came to me knowing full well they were getting a female advisor. Of course, there's been people that I don't gel with. And if you don't have the same cultural fit, just like in an office, you don't employ that person. You don't take that person on as a client. So I feel extremely fortunate, but then I also look at women bring a different level of empathy to financial advice. We understand the emotional connection with finances. So my problem there is we don't have enough financial advisors, female financial advisors coming to the industry, and we don't have enough females asking for advice. So those two things are really putting my industry back, with a whole other gamut.
There's all those other things too, but
So Prue, for you, you're a strong woman, and you are totally organised of every minute of every day, which we've noticed. But
admire.
Yeah, and admire on International Women's Day. You are amazing. But also, you know, in that field, you say there's not many women, and the same could be said for Jo in the accounting world.
Absolutely.
Jo is not the typical accountant with her suit on and all of that stuff. Her,
You try not to be. Yeah, I wear hippie dresses.
Yeah, which is awesome. So it's interesting, and I think will women more now go towards a woman industry that, you know, there is a woman in charge of that, so that, as Lauren said, you know, if she has a baby, then the empathy will be there with Jo. Okay, you can work from home, you know, and because Jo's had children, she gets it.
Yeah.
And because you've had children, I've had children, we all get it. You know, that people
It's
want to
not
be at
easy.
home and school holidays, and you know, we go, yes, here's your computer, make sure you still work.
Yeah.
But you can be at home. So
Yeah.
interesting.
Anything else? We've been talking for quite a while. Is there anything else you guys want to mention before we finish up here?
I think just taking it away from children for a second, it comes back to, rather than just equality, the equity. And this is something that I've done a fair bit of reading on over the last week in the lead up to International
Embracing Equity, which
absolutely.
is our
International
hashtag.
International Women's Day. And it's reading deeply, being a regional rural person myself, from grassroots through to now, it's the accessibility. So giving everyone the same accessibility is great, but understanding that people have different levels of comprehension. So we have all these beautiful regional and rural people, including women, that have access, but because they don't comprehend it, or that wasn't their world. So for me, it is really understanding and honing in on more than just giving people the accessibility, particularly women. It's actually allowing them to tell you how they're going to comprehend and understand that accessibility, whether it be technology, which is concerning. And that's the only way we're going to bring people up, particularly women in this world, is the education.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the four of us sitting in this room all work in the financial area in some aspect, is that financial literacy, because it was always, you know, whether it's right or not, back in the day, it was always the man's job to look after that. And so even now we have clients who are still in that situation, who don't understand how to read their financial reports, or understand what investments they hold, or even understand, you know, what money's in their bank account at any given time.
Yeah. Also, I'm sure you come across it, Prue, particularly older women, and I'm talking older, like my mum's
Like
age,
us.
right?
Yeah.
Who, you know, their husbands will say, well, if something happens to me, my wife would not have a clue.
No.
And I just find that really sad.
I had a friend, as you all know, that lost her husband 18 months ago. And
She wasn't that old,
No, my age.
Yeah.
Thankfully, he had really forced her to understand their family finances and to save for no reason. She didn't understand that concept. What do you mean you save for no reason? Well, when he got cancer, there's the save for no reason. There's your answer. But until you experience that, you don't know. But that's how he was brought up in South Africa. So it's really incredible. And this is my concern, is that when you get to a certain age, even in your 40s, and people become widowed, if they don't understand their family finances, how do they move forward?
Yeah.
Where do they spend it?
Yeah, exactly. So I think we have a long way to go.
Absolutely.
And I think it comes down to implementation as well. Our voices are finally being heard, the collective of women, but it's the implementation of those policies. Drafting them is one thing, implementing them is another. And I think that's a lot of my reading is still the big step that we have to overcome.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably enough.
Happy
It's been
International
an
Women's Day.
awesome
Yes.
conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome.
For
Jo.
those,
Thanks for
we
having
should
us.
sign off.